He paid a credit for a space station on a remote planet. What he found inside left him breathless. Marcus Cole had been living in space for 3 years. And in that time, he had learned one important truth about the galaxy. Nobody cared about humans. The aliens saw Earth's children as young and foolish. A species that had only discovered faster than light travel 2 centuries ago. While other races had been sailing between stars for thousands of years, Marcus did not let this bother him anymore. Because he had stopped caring what aliens thought a long time ago. He was a salvager now. A man who flew from system to system in his beaten-up ship called the Wanderer's Oath. Looking for abandoned technology and scrap metal he could sell for enough credits to keep flying. It was not a glamorous life. But it was his life, and that was enough on this particular day. Marcus found himself on a world called Veth9. A planet covered in thick orange clouds where aliens came to mine valuable gases from the atmosphere. The spaceport was crowded with creatures of all shapes and sizes. And Marcus walked through the busy streets with his hands in his pockets, and his eyes scanning for opportunity. That opportunity came in the form of a sign hanging outside a large building that read Galactic Auction House. All items must go. Marcus had found good deals at auctions before. So he walked inside and took a seat in the back of the room. The auctioneer was a HFY, a species with 4 arms and large compound eyes that looked like clusters of black gems. And he spoke in a rapid clicking voice that the translation device in Marcus's ear turned into words he could understand. Lot 7215, the auctioneer announced. A mining drill from the Veth Corporation. Starting bid 50 credits. Hands and tentacles and claws rose around the room as aliens bid on item after item. Marcus watched and waited, because most of these things were too expensive for his thin wallet. Hours passed, and he was starting to think about leaving when the auctioneer announced something that made his ears perk up. Lot 7219, the HFY said. And something in his voice had changed, becoming quieter and more careful. A space station in orbit around the planet Arion 7 in the Outer Reach territories. A murmur ran through the crowd, and Marcus noticed that several aliens were shaking their heads or making gestures of fear. The station has been under quarantine for 400 standard years. The auctioneer continued. Sold as is with no guarantees and no returns. Starting bid, 1 credit. Marcus leaned forward in his seat. His heart beating faster. 1 credit for a space station was insane, because even the smallest stations were worth millions. And this had to be some kind of tricky drone merchant sitting next to him. A creature that looked like a tall insect with purple shell armor turned and spoke in a hissing whisper. Do not bid on that. Human, the drone warned. That is the silent place. A cursed location where ships enter and never leave. Cursed? Marcus asked, raising an eyebrow. The architects built it, the drone said. And the word came out like a prayer and a curse combined. They vanished 12,000 years ago, but their machines still work. And they do not welcome visitors. Marcus had heard stories about the architects. A mysterious species that had been the most advanced civilization in galactic history before they disappeared without explanation. Their ruins were scattered across 1,000 worlds, and governments paid fortunes for even the smallest pieces of their technology, and here was an entire station being sold for 1 credit, because everyone was too afraid to claim it. 1 credit, the auctioneer repeated. Does anyone wish to bid? The room was silent. Aliens who had been fighting over mining equipment minutes ago now sat frozen in their seats, unwilling to raise a hand. Marcus thought about his empty bank account and his ship that needed repairs and his life that had been going nowhere for 3 long years. He thought about the drone's warning and the fear in the room and the 400 years of silence around a station nobody wanted. And then he thought about something his grandfather had told him back on Earth. When Marcus was just a boy dreaming of the stars, the best opportunities, his grandfather had said, are the ones everyone else is too scared to take. Marcus raised his hand. 1 credit, he called out. And his voice sounded louder than he intended in the quiet room. Every alien in the auction house turned to look at him, and he saw expressions of shock and confusion, and what might have been pity. The auctioneer's compound eyes focused on Marcus for a long moment before he clicked his mandibles in what might have been amusement. 1 credit from the human, the HFY announced. Does anyone wish to counter? Silence, going once. The drone beside Marcus made a gesture that probably meant, you are a fool. Going twice. Somewhere in the back of the room, an alien laughed. A high and cruel sound. Sold, the auctioneer declared. To the human. For 1 credit. Marcus stood up and walked to the front of the room to complete the transaction. And he could feel hundreds of alien eyes on his back. The HFY handed him a data chip containing the ownership documents and the coordinates of the station. And for just a moment, the auctioneer leaned close and spoke in a voice too quiet for others to hear. I have worked this job for 60 years, human, and I have seen that lot appear in 17 different auctions. You are the first to ever bid. Marcus took the chip and put it in his pocket. Maybe I'm just stupid, he said. Maybe, the auctioneer agreed. Or maybe you are something else entirely. Marcus left the auction house and walked back to his ship through streets that suddenly felt more alive with possibility than they had in years. He had just bought a space station for 1 credit. He had no idea what he would find there, but for the first time in a very long time, Marcus Cole felt something that surprised him. He felt excited. He climbed into the cockpit of the Wanderer's Oath and entered the coordinates into his navigation computer. And the screen displayed a route to a star system so far from major trade lanes that most maps did not even bother to name it. Well, Marcus said to his empty ship, let us go see what everyone is so afraid of. The engines hummed to life, and the Wanderer's Oath rose from the surface of Veth9 and pointed its nose toward the stars. Somewhere out there, in the cold darkness between galaxies, a station that had been waiting for 400 years detected the approaching ship, and deep within its ancient systems, something began to wake up. The journey to Arion 7 took 11 days through hyperspace, and Marcus spent most of that time reading everything he could find about the DO's architects. The information was scattered and incomplete, because the architects had vanished so long ago that most of what remained were legends and guesses. What the records agreed on was this: 12,000 years ago, the architects had been the most powerful species in the known galaxy, with technology so advanced that modern scientists still could not understand how it worked. They had built cities that floated in the clouds of gas giants and ships that could cross the galaxy in hours, and machines that seemed to bend the laws of physics like toys, and then, without any warning, they disappeared. No war had destroyed them, and no plague had killed them, and no enemy had conquered them. They simply vanished, leaving behind empty cities and silent stations and mysteries that had haunted the galaxy ever since. What happened to you? Marcus asked the darkness of space as his ship flew through the swirling colors of hyperspace. But the darkness did not answer on the 12th day. The Wanderer's Oath dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Arion system, and Marcus got his first look at his new Propertarian 7 hung in space below him. A dead world of rust-red continents and dried ocean beds that had not held water for millions of years. No life existed on that planet, and no colony had ever been established there, because there was nothing worth taking. But in orbit around that dead world, catching the light of the distant sun like a jewel made of metal and mystery, was the station. Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. The auction records had described the station as medium-sized commercial facility. But those words were a joke compared to the reality. The station was enormous, stretching across space like a cathedral built by giants, with towers and domes and structures that curved in ways that made his eyes hurt to look at them directly. The architecture was wrong somehow, designed by minds that did not think the way human minds thought, and covered in patterns and symbols that his ship's computer could not translate. "That is not a commercial facility," Marcus said quietly. "That is something else entirely." His sensors began feeding him data, and none of it made sense. The station was drawing power from somewhere, but there was no sun close enough to provide solar energy and no visible reactor signatures. The hull was made of materials his computer could not identify, metals or alloys that did not match anything in the galactic database, and despite being abandoned for 400 years at minimum, and probably much longer than that, the station showed no signs of decay or damage. It was pristine, as if someone had built it yesterday. Warning lights began flashing on his console, and his computer's voice spoke with urgent concern. "Caution. Unknown energy signatures detected. Recommend immediate withdrawal." Marcus stared at the station and thought about the drone's warning and the fear in the auction house and the 400 years of silence. Every smart instinct in his body told him to turn around and fly away and never look back. But humans had never been very good at listening to smart instincts. What is the worst that could happen? Marcus asked himself, and then he laughed at the absurdity of the question. He pointed his ship toward the station and began his approach. As he got closer, more details became visible, and each one raised more questions than answers. The station had docking bays, dozens of them, but they were designed for ships much larger than anything modern civilizations built. The towers were covered in what looked like windows, but they did not reflect light the way normal windows should, and everywhere, on every surface, were those strange symbols, flowing across the metal like frozen rivers of meaning. His communication system crackled with static, and for a moment, Marcus thought he heard something beneath the noise, a pattern that might have been music or might have been a voice, and the static cleared, and the docking bay door began to open. Marcus had not sent any signal or request, but the station was opening for him anyway. "Okay," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "That is either very welcoming or very ominous." He guided the wanderer's oath through the open door and into a docking bay so large that his ship looked like a toy inside a warehouse. The moment his landing gear touched the floor, the door behind him closed, and lights began to turn on throughout the bay. Blue lights, soft and gentle, illuminating walls covered in more of those flowing symbols. Marcus sat in his cockpit for a long minute, staring at the alien environment around him. His sensors told him the air outside was breathable, which should have been impossible for a station that had been sealed for centuries. His sensors told him the temperature was comfortable for human life, which made even less sense. His sensors told him there were no life signs detected anywhere on the station, and yet the station had opened its doors for him and turned on its lights for him and made itself ready for him. "Someone knows I am here," Marcus said. He stood up from his seat and walked to the airlock, and he paused with his hand on the release button. This was the moment of decision, the point of no return. Once he stepped outside, he would be inside an architect station, alone and far from help, in a place that had scared away every other species in the galaxy. He thought about his grandfather again, and the old man's words about opportunity. Thought about his 3 years of drifting through space with nothing to show for it. Thought about all the aliens who had looked at him with pity or contempt, because he was just a human, a member of a young and foolish species that did not matter. And then Marcus Cole opened the airlock and stepped out onto the floor of a station that had been waiting 12,000 years for someone brave enough to enter. The air smelled clean and fresh, With a faint sweetness he could not identify, the floor beneath his boots was smooth and warm, and somewhere in the distance, echoing through corridors that stretched beyond sight, he heard it again, musicking melodies so faint it might have been imagination, but so beautiful it made his chest ache with an emotion he could not name. "Hello?" Marcus called out, and his voice echoed through the empty bay. "Is anyone there?" The music continued, neither louder nor softer, neither closer nor farther away. It was not answering him, it was inviting him. Marcus took a deep breath, and he began to walk toward the sound. Deeper into the station, deeper into mystery, deeper into a future he could not possibly have imagined. Behind him, unseen and unheard, systems that had been dormant for millennia began recording data about the strange creature that had finally come. The station was learning, and it was pleased with what it found. Marcus walked through corridors that seemed to go on forever, and with every step he took, he felt more certain that he had stumbled into something far beyond his understanding. The station was not just a building in space, it was a museum, a temple, a message left behind by a civilization that had wanted to be remembered. The walls were covered in murals, paintings that showed scenes from a world Marcus had never seen. He saw cities of impossible beauty rising from purple oceans, with towers that touched the clouds and bridges that spanned canyons filled with light. He saw creatures moving through those cities, tall and graceful beings with bodies that seemed almost human, but were clearly something else. They had 7 eyes each, arranged across their faces like a constellation of stars, and their hands had too many fingers, long and delicate and made for creating rather than destroying. These were the architects, shown in their glory, living lives that looked peaceful and full of wonder. Marcus stopped before one mural that showed a group of architects gathered around something that looked like a musical instrument, and he realized that the melody he had been following sounded exactly like what that instrument might play. "You left this for us," Marcus whispered to the empty corridor. "You wanted someone to find it." He kept walking, and the murals changed. As he went deeper into the station, the scenes of happiness and peace began to give way to something darker. He saw architects looking up at the sky with expressions of worry. He saw gatherings where the graceful beings seemed to be arguing or debating, saw images of stars going dark, one by one, and architects building ships that flew toward the edges of their territory. Something had happened to them, something that had ended their civilization. But the murals did not show what they only showed that the architects had known it was coming and had tried to prepare. The melody grew stronger as Marcus approached a massive door at the end of the corridor, a door covered in more symbols than any surface he had seen so far. As he got close, the symbols began to glow with soft golden light, and the door slid open without him touching anything. Beyond was the largest room he had ever seen, a circular chamber that must have been half a kilometer across, with a ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. And in the exact center of that chamber, suspended in a column of pure white light, was a child. Marcus forgot how to breathe. The child was an architect. That much was clear from the 7 eyes and the long fingers. But she was small, no bigger than a human 10-year-old. She floated in the light with her eyes closed and her arms crossed over her chest, and she looked like she was sleeping peacefully around the column of light. Holographic displays flickered and danced, showing data in languages Marcus could not read. But as he stepped into the chamber and approached the sleeping child, the displays began to change. The alien symbols shifted and transformed, becoming letters he recognized, words he could understand. The station had been watching him, learning his language, preparing for this moment. "Welcome, visitor," a voice said, and it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "You have passed the first test." Marcus spun around, looking for the source of the voice, but he saw no one. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What is this place?" "I am the station," the voice answered. I am the last gift of the architects to those who would come after. And you are the first to accept that gift in 12,000 years. The holographic displays around the sleeping child began showing images, and Marcus watched as the history of the station unfolded before his eyes. He saw the architects building this place in secret, working with desperate speed as something terrible approached their civilization. He saw them filling the station with their knowledge, their art, their science, everything that made them who they were. He saw them placing the child in the column of light, the last of their kind, preserved in stasis until someone worthy came to wake her, and he saw ships approaching the station over the centuries, hundreds of them from dozens of different species, all of them turning away before they could enter. We designed a test, the station explained. Not a test of intelligence or strength, because many species have those qualities, but a test of something rarer. We needed to find a species that could hear the song. The melody that had been playing throughout the station grew louder, and Marcus suddenly understood what it was. It was not just music, it was a frequency, a vibration, a call that spoke not to the ears but to something deeper. It spoke to hope, it spoke to curiosity, it spoke to the part of a mind that looked at darkness and wanted to know what was hiding inside it, every species that approached. This station felt the song, the voice continued, but they heard it as a warning, a threat, a reason to flee. The Drawn heard danger, the Therians heard risk, the Cathavali heard the unknown and calculated that the unknown was not worth exploring. But you, human, you heard the song, and you heard something different. Marcus thought about the moment he had raised his hand at the auction, the moment he had decided to fly here, the moment he had stepped through the airlock. He had been afraid. Of course he had been afraid. But beneath the fear had been something stronger: excitement, wonder, the unshakable human belief that whatever was waiting in the darkness might be amazing. You heard possibility, the station said. You heard invitation. You heard a door opening instead of closing. That is what we were searching for. That is what humanity has that no other species in this galaxy possesses in such abundance. You hope even when hope seems foolish. You dream even when dreams seem impossible. You walk toward mystery while others walk away. The sleeping child in the column of light stirred, her 7 eyes moving beneath closed lids. The child's name is Lyeth, the station said. She was 4 years old when we placed her in stasis, and she has been waiting for someone like you ever since. Will you wake her, human? Will you accept the inheritance we have left behind? Marcus looked at the child, this last survivor of a species that had ruled the galaxy when humanity was still learning to make fire. He thought about everything he had seen, the murals and the music and the technology that seemed like magic. He thought about what it would mean to wake her, to become responsible for her, to carry the legacy of the architects into a future they would never see. And he thought about something simple and human and true. No child should have to sleep alone for 12,000 years. Yes, Marcus said, and his voice was steady. I accept. The column of light pulsed once, twice, 3 times, and Lyeth, last daughter of the architects, opened her eyes for the first time in 12 millennia. Lyeth's 7 eyes blinked slowly, adjusting to light she had not seen in 12,000 years. And the first thing she did was look directly at Marcus. Her eyes were the color of amber, warm and bright, and they held an intelligence that seemed far older than her. Small body suggested. The column of light lowered her gently to the floor, and she stood on unsteady legs, reaching out with one long-fingered hand to catch her balance. Marcus moved forward without thinking and caught her arm, holding her steady until she found her footing. Careful, he said softly. You have been asleep for a very long time. Lyeth looked up at him, studying his face with those strange and beautiful eyes. And then she spoke in a voice that sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. You are not what I expected, she said. And her words came out in perfect English, the station having taught her while she slept. My people showed me images of the young species, the ones who might one day inherit our gifts. You are smaller than I imagined. Marcus laughed, a surprised sound that echoed through the chamber. I could say the same about you, he replied. The architects are legendary, and here you are, barely taller than my waist. Something flickered across Lia's face, and Marcus realized with a start that she was smiling. I was young when my parents placed me here, she said. They told me I would sleep until someone worthy came, someone who could hear the song and understand what it meant. They did not tell me it would take so long. Her voice grew quieter, and Marcus saw grief flash through her eyes. Ancient and deep, she was 4 years old in body, but 12,000 years old in loss. The last survivor of a species that had loved her enough to give her a chance at life, even as they faced their own ending. Marcus knelt down so they were at the same eye level. I am sorry, he said. I cannot imagine what this must feel like for you. Lia studied him again, her head tilting to one side. You are sincere, she said, and there was wonder in her voice. You feel sorrow for a stranger you just met, a creature from a species you never knew. This is what the song sensed in you. This is why the station opened for you when it rejected all others. She reached out and placed her small hand against his chest, right over his heart. You feel so much, she whispered. Your emotions burn like stars inside you, bright and wild and impossible to contain. My people were wise and ancient, but we had learned to be calm, to think before feeling, to control ourselves. Perhaps that is why we could not save ourselves when the end came. Perhaps we needed someone who would act on hope instead of just thinking about it. The station's voice spoke again, filling the chamber with its presence. The child speaks truth, human, and now it is time for you to see what you have inherited. The holographic displays around them expanded, growing until they filled the entire chamber with images and data. Marcus stood up and turned in a slow circle. Watching as the station revealed its secrets, he saw star maps showing the entire galaxy, with systems and planets marked in colors he did not understand. He saw blueprints for machines that could do things modern science said were impossible. Devices that could generate gravity, or bend space, or harvest energy. From the void between stars, he saw medical knowledge that could cure diseases humanity had not even discovered. Yet he saw art and music and literature from a civilization that had created beauty for 10,000 years before vanishing. He saw the complete legacy of the architects, preserved and waiting, a gift beyond measure. This station is a seed, the voice explained. We knew our end was approaching, and we could not stop it. But we could ensure that everything we learned and created would not be lost. We built this place and filled it with our knowledge. And we designed the song to find the species that was most capable of using these gifts wisely. You have passed the test. Human, all of this belongs to you now. Marcus felt his knees go weak, and he sat down on the floor of the chamber, overwhelmed by what he was seeing. One credit. He had paid one credit for technology that could change the course of galactic history. I do not understand, he said. Why me specifically? Why not humanity as a whole? Why give all of this to one person? Because trust must begin with one, Liath answered. And one must prove worthy before many can be trusted. You are the first human to find us. And so you are the one who will decide how these gifts are shared. My parents believed in individual choice, in personal responsibility. They would not have wanted to give this power to a government or a council. They wanted to give it to a heart. Before Marcus could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The holographic displays shifted, showing a view of space outside. And Marcus saw something that made his stomach drop. Ships were approaching, dozens of them, then hundreds, appearing out of hyperspace like a swarm of angry insects. Their designs were varied. representing at least 5 different species. And they were all heading directly for the station. "Word has spread," the station said calmly. "The auction house records were accessed. And now the galaxy knows that a human has claimed the architect inheritance. They are coming to take it from you." Marcus stood up and watched the fleet approaching. His heart pounding, he recognized some of the ship. Designs from his years of salvaging Therian warships with their distinctive curved hulls. Valley. Cruisers bristling with weapons-drawn carriers. Large enough to hold entire armies and leading them all. A massive vessel flying the banner of the Galactic Council, the organization that claimed to represent all spacefaring species in the galaxy. "The Council has declared this station a threat to galactic security," the voice continued. "They are demanding that you surrender it immediately. If you refuse, they will take it by force." Lyeth moved to stand beside Marcus, her small hand finding his. "What will you do?" she asked. Marcus looked at the fleet, at the power arrayed against him, at the impossible odds, and then he looked at Lyeth, at the hope in her ancient young eyes, at the trust she was placing in a creature she had just met. He thought about everything the station contained, everything it could do for humanity, everything it could do for the galaxy if it was shared wisely instead of hoarded by the powerful. He thought about what his grandfather would have said, and Marcus Cole, salvager and drifter and stubborn human, made a decision. "I'm going to tell them no," he said. Lyeth smiled again, bright and fierce. "Good," she said. "I was hoping you would say that." The communication system crackled to life, and a voice filled the chamber. Cold and commanding, and filled with the arrogance of someone who had never been told no. "Human vessel. This is High Admiral Keth Voran of the Galactic Council Fleet," the voice announced. "You are in possession of technology that has been classified as a threat to galactic stability. You will surrender the station immediately and submit yourself for questioning." This is not a request. Marcus walked to a control panel that the station helpfully illuminated for him, and he pressed the button that opened a return channel. "Admiral," he said, keeping his voice calm despite his racing heart. "My name is Marcus Cole, and I am the legal owner of this station. I bought it at a licensed auction for 1 credit, and I have the documents to prove it. I will not be surrendering anything." There was silence on the other end, and Marcus could imagine the alien admiral's surprise at being defied by a member of a species the galaxy considered insignificant when the voice returned. It was harder and colder than before. "Human, you do not seem to understand your situation. There are 400 warships surrounding your position, representing the 5 most powerful species in the known galaxy. You have 1 salvage vessel and no weapons. What exactly do you think you are going to do?" Marcus looked at Lyeth, who was watching him with those ancient amber eyes. "Can the station defend itself?" he asked her quietly. Lyeth smiled, and there was something in that smile that reminded Marcus of a child about to share a wonderful secret. "My people were not warriors," she said, "but they were very good at protecting what they loved." She walked to the center of the chamber and placed both hands on a pedestal that rose from the floor, and she began to sing. It was the same melody that had drawn Marcus through the station, the song that had been playing since he arrived. But now it was louder and clearer and more powerful than before. The entire station began to vibrate with the sound, and the holographic displays showed energy readings that climbed higher and higher outside. Something incredible was happening. A shield was forming around the station, a barrier of shimmering golden light that expanded outward in a perfect sphere. The leading ships of the fleet tried to stop, but they were too close, and when they touched the edge of the shield, they were pushed back like leaves in a wind. No damage, no destruction, just an immovable wall that told them they were not welcome. The Admiral's voice returned, and this time there was something new in it. "Fear. What is that?" he demanded. "What kind of technology can produce a shield that size?" Marcus leaned toward the communication panel. "Admiral, I am going to explain something to you. And I want you to listen very carefully. The architects did not build this station as a weapon. They built it as a gift. It contains the complete knowledge of their civilization. Everything they learned in 10,000 years of exploring the universe. Cures for diseases, solutions for energy problems. Answers to questions that modern science has not even thought to ask. All of it could be shared with the galaxy. All of it could help everyone. He paused, letting his words sink in. But if you try to take it by force, if you try to steal what was freely given, then you will get nothing. The station will defend itself for as long as necessary. And you will sit out there in the cold void of space, watching everything you want stay forever out of reach. So here is what is going to happen. You are going to turn your ships around and go home. And when the Galactic Council is ready to have a civilized conversation about how this technology can benefit everyone, they can send a diplomatic mission instead of a war fleet. Those are my terms. Take them or leave them. The communication channel went silent. Marcus watched the holographic display as the fleet held position. Hundreds of warships facing a shield they could not breach. And he wondered if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Minutes passed that felt like hours, and then, slowly, one ship at a time, the fleet began to withdraw. That admiral's voice came one last time, tight with barely controlled anger. This is not over. Human, the Council will not forget this insult. You have made very powerful enemies today. The channel closed, and Marcus let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. They are leaving, he said, almost unable to believe it. They are actually leaving. Lyeth stopped singing, and the shield around the station faded. Though the energy reading showed it could be activated again in an instant, she walked over to Marcus and looked up at him with an expression of wonder. You stood against the combined might of 5 species, she said. You had no weapons and no army and no reason to believe you would survive. And you did it anyway. Why? Marcus thought about the question for a long moment. Because someone had to, he finally said. Because if I had given up, then everything your parents sacrificed would have been for nothing. Because humans are stubborn and stupid, and we refuse to quit even when quitting makes sense. And because you trusted me, I was not going to let you down. Lyeth reached up and took his hand again, her long fingers wrapping around his. My parents chose well, she said softly. They searched the galaxy for 12,000 years, and they found you. I am glad. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. So what happens now? He asked. Now we begin, Lyeth answered. We study what my people left behind, and we decide together how to share it with a galaxy that has proven it cannot be trusted to share fairly. It will take time. It will be difficult. But you have something my people never had at the end. You have hope, and apparently, that makes all the difference, Marcus laughed. A sound of pure joy that echoed through the ancient chamber. He was standing in a station worth more than entire planetary systems, with the last survivor of a legendary species holding his hand, looking out at a galaxy that had just learned to fear a salvager from Earth 1 credit. That was what he had paid, and what he had received in return was the chance to change everything. All right then, Marcus said, grinning despite himself. Let us get to work. Outside, the stars shone cold and bright and full of possibility, and somewhere across the vast reaches of space, the galaxy was learning a new word, human. They were beginning to understand what it meant, and they would never forget.